Have you ever felt out of control? Are you constantly running in a state of stress? Are there times when you're on the verge of panic? Today we're going to look at the differences between stress and anxiety and what we can do about both. Most people experience stress and anxiety at some point in their lives. Depending on the level of severity, they can adversely impact one's quality of life. Although stress and anxiety share many of the same emotional and physical symptoms, uneasiness, tension, headaches, high blood pressure, and loss of sleep, they have very different origins. Determining which one you're experiencing is critical to finding an effective treatment plan and feeling better. In general, stress is a response to an external cause, such as a tight deadline at work or having an argument with a friend, and it diminishes once the situation's been resolved. Because stress is caused by external factors, tackling these stresses head-on can often help. There are many ways to help you de-stress, including physical activity, breathing exercises, adequate sleep, and taking time to connect with others. Anxiety is a person's specific reaction to stress, and its origin is internal. Anxiety is typically characterized by a persistent feeling of apprehension or dread in a situation that isn't actually threatening. Unlike stress, anxiety persists even after the concern has passed, and in more severe cases, anxiety can escalate into an anxiety disorder. It's important to know how to identify and differentiate signs of stress and/or anxiety. Stress is a common trigger for anxiety, so it's important to catch anxiety symptoms early to prevent development of an anxiety disorder. Now, each personality type have their own stresses. So today we're going to look at the judging and perceiving pair of psychological preferences of the Myers-Briggs type indicator. This fourth preference describes how you like to live your outer life. What are the behaviours that other people tend to see? Do you prefer a structured, decided lifestyle, judging, or a more flexible and adaptable lifestyle, perceiving? If you're a judging type, you enjoy structure, lists, planning, meeting deadlines on time. You love it when everything runs to schedule and nothing goes wrong. Is this you? If it is, you have realised, unfortunately, this isn't how life always works. Adapting to change in your scheduled life means adding to your already packed schedules. This can throw you into disarray and create great stress and anger and impatience. If this rings true for you, your first step to relieve your stress is to leave yourself breaks in your timetable. So important. Because when incidental tasks, problems, and just life really, get thrown into your path, this will give you the space in your day, week, month, or year to readjust your list, your expectations, and your headspace. This will leave you with options and spaces in your highly programmed lifestyle and will reduce the overwhelm and anxiety that unexpected changes can bring for you. If you're a perceiving type, you enjoy a life that's flexible, easygoing, with few, if any, deadlines. However, sadly, life is not this simple. What can happen is you can end up having many deadlines that need to be met at the same time, and you may not have actually done any work towards any of them. You can end up engulfed in overwhelm and immobilized at the thought of the task ahead. Does this sound like you? To avoid this happening, perceiving types can make it a practice to break down tasks into manageable chunks of work in the weeks before the assignment, job, or task is due. This will ensure that much of the framework has been taken care of as you begin that perceiving type's exhilarating last-minute dash to finish the project or projects. In situations such as these, knowing and understanding your personality is one of the most important things, as it enables you to find out what your stresses are at every level and the different ways of solving them. Now, this will take time and focus, but it will be a huge stress buster for you in the long run. There's no direct correlation between specific Myers and Briggs personality types and anxiety disorders. Research suggests your personality can influence how you respond to stress. Everyone is different. The most important thing is to realize the signs of stress and/or anxiety in yourself and nip them in the bud through self-care and support. I'm Kate Mason, and welcome to Parenting and Personalities. This is the podcast that connects you to the ones you care about the most. Today we're talking with emotional intelligence parent coach, paediatric anxiety therapist, and international speaker Stephanie Pinto. Stephanie's passion is helping parents and their children to have a calmer and connected life and better relationships with those around them. Hi, Stephanie. Look, thanks for joining us again.
Thank you, Kate. It's a pleasure to be here.
In our previous podcast, we spoke about the importance of emotional intelligence and how we as parents can help ourselves and our children. And today we're looking at anxiety. Now, just a bit of a question. Why is everyone anxious these days? Or is it a word? Or is it a word that's actually not used correctly in a lot of circumstances?
Yeah, really good question. I think that the last couple of years have put a lot of stress on families and kids in particular. And so there's probably, a number of reasons why we're seeing more anxious kids. I know for my eldest, he started kindy, his first year of school, in 2020. So that was interesting. He really didn't get any sense of what a normal school introduction looked like. There was lots of disruption, there was lots of unknown, there was lots of uncertainty, and that's basically the foundation of an anxiety disorder, which is that fear of uncertainty and not knowing what is happening, not being able to control what is going to come. So we all have anxiety. That's one of the normal natural emotions. A certain level of anxiety is healthy because it's a protective emotion. It's very primitive. It's protective. It pushes us into this fight or flight. Are we going to be okay? Do we need to take steps? Do we need to remove ourselves? Do we need to fight? Sort of thing. And people like athletes and actors use anxiety to rev up and to do a good performance. So it's not in itself a bad emotion. I hate how emotions get a bad rap, but I do think, anxiety does become a problem and has for a lot of kids when it becomes too great or occurs too frequently that it stops kids from doing what they want to be able to do or things that they need to be able to do, like going to school. So yes, it's really challenging, and I think a lot of parents are struggling with how to support their anxious kids. So, and I totally get that. It pulls on your heartstrings,
So my thing is, back in the day, anxious was never used. Okay, you were stressed or you were worried. So now everybody's anxious. So to me, sometimes people are using anxiety in place of the word stress.
Yep.
And for me, the word stress implies that there is a way out, I had an adult at my dinner table the other week, and she said, I'm really anxious. And I just looked at her and said, so what's your stress about? Tell me. And she told me what she was stressed about. And I said to her, so how can we address this? What are we going to do? And we worked out we worked out a way out of it. Whereas for me, a lot of the time, anxiety implies you can't get out of it. Stress implies there's a way through. And so sometimes I wonder whether people are going, I'm anxious, and they're actually just stressed. I don't know. There are differences to that, aren't there?
Yeah, there are. And I think, as you said before, a lot of emotions are kind of clumped together under anger is a great example. People often feel like they're really angry or mad or pissed off with someone or at a situation. But actually, when they take time to reflect on what's happening and what they're really feeling, they actually might feel hurt or disappointed or even anxious. But the umbrella on the surface level sort of thing is anger. So yes, I think we do need to be a little bit more clear and about those nuanced emotions that they can overlap, there can be similarities, but yeah, it's unhelpful if a lot of people are resonating with the term anxiety. I've got anxiety, when really they might just need support to manage their stress, which is different to that the fear of the unknown. Like it's really anxiety in itself is a negative, it's an unrealistic negative mindset. And so there are two kind of hallmarks, I guess, of anxiety or the anxious brain. And the first one is let's say if it's a child with anxiety, they see neutral events as more negative. So they will see a car driving down the street. We might see that as neutral, okay, we'll just wait till the car goes and then we'll cross. A child with anxiety or the anxious brain will see that as dangerous, that there's a threat. That car what if it comes off the road and hits us? So it's seeing something that is innocuous or safe as unsafe and threatening. So that's the first part of anxiety. And then the second part is that the anxious brain perceives that bad thing, if that does happen, will be catastrophic. I will not be able to cope. It will be too hard. I can't cope or I will die. So they will have those really negative and, like I said, unrealistic thought patterns around things that other people, can cope with. So it can be so debilitating and so stressful, and it can be very difficult for parents to know how to navigate.
So it's kind of like your fight and flight is actually out of control.
Yeah.
It's not just saving you; it's actually immobilizing you more than anything.
Yeah, it's almost so we'd obviously talk about the amygdala, which is the part of the emotional center in the brain, and that can be almost like sensitized, hypersensitive. And so it's a bit like it's your alarm system or the watchdog of your brain. It'll alert you to things that might go wrong, that would be scary or dangerous, that will fail, that won't go well. Public speaking is such a common one. So it's really something that, we have a lot of tools, we have a lot of strategies and a lot of therapeutic approaches now that are very, very evidence-based. They are powerful, they are very beneficial, and it's just about rewiring those anxious, negative, unrealistic thoughts so that they are more calm and realistic and more positive. I say realistic intentionally, because we can't trick our brain into thinking everything will always be fine. It will be amazing. There'll be no problems at school and the swimming pool will be so safe and exciting. Like, no, sometimes there are risks and things like that. So we want to be realistic, or we want to support our kids who are anxious to change their negative wiring and those thoughts to calmer and more realistic thoughts. Because, for example, I've helped. A really common one is kids with a fear of dogs. And I have helped kids who feel like a dog will attack them, will bite them, they won't be able to cope or get away. I've helped them to see that most of the time, like 99% of the time, dogs actually don't bite. They don't attack. They sniff and lick you. But there is a small chance that a dog will nip you or will scratch you if they jump up. So it's about being realistic, which is still positive and it's still calm, but not over the top rosy and everything is peachy, because like we said, there's going to be inevitable challenges and disappointments and failures in life, and we've got to allow our kids to be ready for those.
Them. That's right. And so really don't race up to every dog, but understand that every dog's not out to bite you. We hear about happy, cohesive, productive teams, but do they exist, or are they a figment of a manager's imagination? Well, yes, they do. And I can help you make this happen. If you're ready to get your team working as one, contact me at thepersonalitycoach.com.au. So what kind of other work, so in this area, what kind of work do you do? Do you work with anxious adults and anxious children? And what kind of work do you do? When you're desensitizing somebody, do you have another example of what you might do for that?
Yeah, so I just work with kids and teens who have anxiety. So, and actually most of the families that I work with, because I work with a child and their parent, it's a bit of a team approach. Most of the kids actually don't have a anxiety diagnosis, but their parents know that they are so anxious, they're so, nervous, not confident, and things like that, and sensitive. So the program that I use is called the Cool Kids program, and that's one created by the Macquarie University team of psychologists. It's heavily evidence-based. There is a lot of research that has gone into it and is still ongoing. The statistics around the sort of recovery rates are incredible. It's something like up to 80% of kids who complete the 10-week program will see a significant reduction, like a statistically significant reduction in their anxious behaviors, and around about 60% would lose their anxiety diagnosis, their primary anxiety diagnosis. So the foundation or the basis of the program is CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. And there's two parts to that. If you think cognitive and behavioral, cognitive means we are undoing and replacing those cognitions, those anxious thoughts. And then the behavior part is we do a graded exposure, which is essentially gradually and systematically and supportively exposing the child to the thing that creates the anxiety. So it's the speaking up in class, or it's the going near a big dog, or it's getting in the swimming pool, going to school, things like that. So we're gradually allowing them to experience that anxiety and that discomfort for just long enough to realize that, I did cope, I didn't die, or that scary thing that I was worried about didn't happen, and I can do that just for a little bit of time. And then we obviously gradually increase the states, the time that they're in that situation, or how close the dog is to them. I've literally done sessions at pet stores with kids. So yeah, it's got to be a bit of both, because anxiety has that physiological body element, the fight or flight, the nerves, the sweaty palms, the running off, that sort of thing, and that's the behavior. But also the cognitions and what we're thinking and what we're telling ourselves, those anxious, worried thoughts. We've got to unpin those and almost like undermine them by helping the child to see, maybe a child who's anxious with separating from their parent and worried that the parent something will happen to them, that they will, get injured or die, something like that. We gradually help the child to see that every time mum or dad has been away from me in the past, they've always come back, and they have never been injured, and they haven't been in a car accident. And even when they're late, they do still always come back to me. So we're unpinning those negative, anxious thoughts and replacing them with more realistic ones. Sometimes mum or dad is late, but they do always come back. And
yes.
maybe I've had this happen. Maybe mum was in a car accident once, but she's been out away and driving and visiting people hundreds of times. And one time she was in an accident. So sometimes I've literally done the maths with kids, and I've said, how many times have you been at school, and how many times have you, for example, vomited? I was supporting a child who was fearful that when they got to school, they would vomit. So it doesn't have to make sense to us, but it makes sense to them. And so we literally did the maths of, 1,500 days of being at school, and out of two of those, out of those 1,000 something, twice I've vomited. I'm like, okay, so they're pretty low odds. And the child goes, oh, yeah, it is. So it's a bit of both. It's a bit of
it's a bit of rationalizing to the brain too, isn't it? These are the rational thoughts, because as we said on our previous podcast, you used to faint in stress. So that's a very scary thing to have happen physically to you. From stress. I mean, just the fact that you could hurt yourself really badly as well. So how did you get out of that? Yeah. What kind of therapy did you use to get yourself through that?
That's actually a good question. I've kind of reflected on that. I remember doing some sessions with a psychologist in my early 20s, probably for a year, if that. And unfortunately, they weren't helpful for me. And I did nothing through the rest of my 20s, and in my early 30s, fell into or discovered emotional intelligence, really started looking at my own emotions, and particularly the anxiety and the, connecting what was happening in my body, because we know emotions are that full body response. What was happening in my body, how I was essentially being taken out of the situation, like that's protective, primitive protective sort of thing. And then connecting that to the situation and thinking, wow, every time I was in this situation or that one, realizing that was almost like my emotions, or it's really my nervous system's way of protecting me from this perceived threat and danger, which again, like it was talking in front of people, or it was going on a stroke ward, or it was whatever it was. But so I think just that knowledge and that understanding and my research myself has dramatically reduced my, any of those fainting episodes. The last couple of times I fainted was really if I hadn't eaten and it was in the morning and I jumped in the shower and I was hot, and then so I know I have to take care of my body, but I think accepting the emotions and the anxiety and almost befriending it, maybe not that much, but really honoring it and valuing it, and
it's keeping you safe.
Yeah.
That those type of things, absolutely. Yeah. And the thing is that what you've also done is you've taught yourself, what I say to people is everything that you learn and you can put in place and help yourself with is so important. There's so much out there for all of us to learn and understand. And if you're able to utilize it on yourself, even better, these are all, you learned all of this stuff for yourself, and that's how you managed to, get over those things. So what are some ways, can you just leave us with a few tips of, if I'm a parent, how can I just help my child? Is there anything I can do at home that might help them?
Yep, absolutely. A couple of things first off are talking about emotions and normalizing those, stressful emotions like anxiety or fear or worry. I think parents often don't want to talk about it. They want to leave it to the day or sweep it under the rug. I'm like, no, get it out in the open. Validate and empathize with your child that this is really tough for them, or that this is really scary, this is so hard, and it seems like they're never going to be able to do it. So if we can normalize the emotions, talk about them, have conversations, and even things like, planning ahead and proactively and collaboratively problem solving with our kids, that, if there's an assembly coming up, or if there's a presentation or something that is going to create a bit of anxiety, then proactively working with them to create a bit of a plan of what would make it easier for you, what would give you a little bit more confidence, what could we do or not do that's going to make that day or that experience a little bit easier. So it might be, driving by the new school or walking past the gates and having conversation about, what it looks like inside and what the teachers might be like. It might be looking on the school website, going to a new school and looking at the colors, the uniforms, the classrooms and images. It might be going into the office or into the gates on a morning, just having a quick look around and walking back out. So lots of what we call taking a little step first, lots of little steps that build our child's understanding and confidence of what it would be like, what they can expect, some things that they could take, or, lots of different things that can help them feel a little less scary and a little less out in the unknown, because building that familiarity and giving them some tools and some strategies for, when they do go in and then they start to feel their heart racing, what can they do? How can they get some help and just get a bit of support that way? Like, there's so much we can do to help our kids, rather than, like I said, just waiting to the day, hoping for the best, and then shoving them in the car and just hoping that the teachers will deal with it, kind of thing.
Yes. Yep. And the thing is that when I look at personalities, I look at developing for the child also if they're a sensing type of person that really likes to see the details and step their way into a situation. This is a really great thing for them to do too, which I always advise. I've got a son like that. I'm like that myself. So when my son was at university, he had a new university he had to go to. He and I actually went to that university. We calculated how long it would take to drive there. We drove there. He drove there with me. We walked all around the university grounds. We worked out which rooms he would be in, and then we came home. And so for him, that anxiety or stress level that he might have around that was solved. He felt comfortable. The new experience was going to be great. So I think that's really important for a lot of kids, people, whether it's stress or anxiety, to involve themselves in, to understand how to solve their stress. So, yeah.
Oh, I love that, Kate. And if I can share a story quickly about my eldest, because it relates, and I think this will be really helpful for parents to get a sense of what they can do when their child is in the anxiety-provoking situation. My son, he was probably 6 or 7 at the time, and we'd signed him up to jiu-jitsu classes after school. My husband was super excited about that. And we had been talking to him for a few weeks beforehand. We had got the fancy white uniform with the belt. We'd also organised for his grandparents, one set of grandparents, to come along and watch because they were also really excited. And so come the day, we get in the car. Everything's still fine. He was excited. We drove to the jiu-jitsu, is it called a dojo? I'm actually not sure.
I'm not sure either.
And so we rocked up there, and the moment we drive into the car park, my son starts saying, I'm not going. I want to go home. I'm not getting out of the car. I don't want to do this anymore. And my husband and I are like, what are we going to do? And so luckily I kind of switched myself on. And I thought, okay, let's like work with this. We hadn't done any of the looking at the center on the internet before. We haven't done any drive-bys. We haven't done any watching YouTube clips on, jiu-jitsu. So I realized he really didn't have any concept of what he was kind of in for. He'd heard stories of my husband and things like that. But so what we did in that moment was, well, let me tell you what we didn't do, because this can be helpful too. We didn't say, what do you mean you're not going in? Are you serious? We have paid all this money. Everyone is here. Your grandparents are outside. We've come this afternoon. We're so excited. Don't waste our time and our money. We're here now. There's no point going home. Get inside. So we didn't, shame him. We didn't make light of, we didn't dismiss his feelings. I said, it sounds like you don't want to go in. He said, yeah, no, I don't want to go in. I'm not going. And I said, wow, tell me what's up. What are you feeling? How come you don't want to go in? And he said, I think he said, I'm scared, or I don't want to go in. I don't think I like it. It'll be boring. Lots of sort of surface level answers, I guess, sometimes come from our kids. They are just overtaken by the emotion of, oh, it's scary. I don't know what to do. I don't like it. It's going to be hard. Maybe I can't do it, sort of thing. So we hatched a plan whilst the grandparents waited outside on the footpath. I was like motioning to them. I'm like, just give us a minute. And we hatched a plan for me to go inside with my phone and to take some photos of what it looked like inside and then come back outside and show him. And he thought that was brilliant. So I did that and took some photos. And then I said he was fine to come into like the foyer area only and just have a look around, but he did not want to do the class. And I said, okay. So we went in and we sat down and we looked around and we talked about what we could see and the noises. They were starting the class. And after a couple of minutes of sitting in there, then he said, well, maybe I can just, because it was up then on the next sort of flight of stairs. He said, maybe I can just go and look at the top of the stairs and see what's happening, because he could hear the noises and the slapping on the mats and the from the kids. So in the end, long story short, we went up, he watched for another couple of minutes and then sat on my husband's lap on the benches where the parents were and watched the class. He didn't do the class that day, and that was fine by us, because we thought, well, bit by bit, we're going to show him that it is safe, and not only that, that it's actually kind of fun. And the other big thing is we validated that going to a new place is scary and it's a bit nerve-wracking and you don't really know what to expect. So without pushing him into the situation and just overriding his anxiety, which really is invalidating the signals coming up from him that he's just paying attention to, saying, I don't know, I don't feel safe, I don't want to go in. I think the next couple of sessions he was in there, he was doing the lesson, he got a little stripe on his belt after a couple of months kind of thing. He was super proud. And I just always reflect on how differently that could have gone if I was the old me, the old type of parent who would have just said, I don't care. We've signed you up for a term. I'm not wasting that money. Get in there. Stop being a baby. So it can go very differently based on how we respond in a situation.
That is a really great example too, because it is about changing your reaction to that situation as an adult and managing it and listening to them. I talk about, you and I had a chat about really listening to the person when they say they're scared or whatever, not blowing off whatever emotion that they're talking to or at. And then, sometimes that does have to happen. You do have to kind of waste a lesson of watching. But I've observed that in children that come to swimming lessons because we've got indoor swim schools. And sometimes they just need to sit and watch and just take it all in, because those environments are noisy and there's a whole lot of kids there. It is very, very overwhelming. So so many great hints and things to think about today. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm sure that many listeners are going to have a lot of takeaway moments from the stuff you've shared today. And as I said on the previous podcast, your information will be in the show notes, so that if anyone wants to get in contact with you, they're all sitting there and you're a lovely person to be dealing with. So I'm sure they'd have a wonderful, wonderful chat with you. So thank you for coming today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you for kind of allowing me the time to waffle on about the stuff I love.
Love it.
but I also know it's so beneficial for parents and for kids. So thank you for giving me the chance to kind of share what I know.
Pleasure. There are so many ways you can help yourself and your child understand and reduce stress and anxiety levels. It's important to take the time to address this with love, understanding, and knowledge. Helping your child to identify anxious thoughts, feelings, and behaviours, and discover realistic thoughts and expectations, and helping them to become more confident and independent is a gift for life. I'm Kate Mason. Thank you for listening to Parenting and Personalities. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you could leave a rating and a review. That would help others learn about this podcast. If you're interested in discovering more about you and your family's personality types, you'll find my newly launched book, Who Is This Monster or Treasure in My House, on Booktopia or Amazon. If you have an episode idea, please send a note to thepersonitycoach@gmail.com. Many thanks to our producers at Stories and Strategies, and more than anything else, please share this episode with one friend. Thanks, and see you next time.